In today's video, we'll look at two expeditions into the depths that went horribly wrong. In both stories, a series of reckless decisions sealed their fate. What went wrong? Let's find out. And as always, viewer discretion is advised. On a chilly Sunday in January 1991, three adventurers headed to Megawell Cave in Alabama. John, the seasoned leader with a decade of caving experience, brought along two newer explorers, Linda and Charles. While both were relatively green, 26-year-old Charles stood out for his boldness, having already conquered tough vertical drops like Tennessee's famous sinkhole. Their mission? To tackle Megawell's massive 310-foot pit, that's taller than the Statue of Liberty, and explore its depths before weather turned worse. There was just one problem. The cave's entrance sat in a gushing stream, swollen from recent rains. Water poured into the pit like a natural shower, drenching everything in its path. Not ideal conditions, but they decided to proceed anyway. John had brought a special rope, a 600-foot European model he'd bought used from Polish cavers in Mexico. They'd promised it was practically new and could hold over 2 tons. But here's the catch. European ropes behave differently than American ones. This small detail would soon become very important. The team chose to rig their rope on the right side to dodge the worst of the waterfall spray. This meant the bolts would take a straight pull instead of the safer sideways force. Not ideal, but they figured it would hold. The rope ran down a steep slope for about 7 meters, like sliding down a playground slide, before reaching the pit's edge. Here's where things got sketchy. 6 meters down, the rope rubbed against a sharp rocky ledge. The stone had deep grooves cut into it, clear signs of past rope damage. Beyond this danger spot, the rope hung free into darkness. John went first, testing the setup. The rope vibrated softly as he disappeared over the edge. Linda followed carefully. Then came Charles. At 110 kilograms, 240 pounds, plus soaking wet gear, he was putting serious strain on the system. By 2 p.m., all three stood at the bottom, soaked but successful. The cavern was breathtaking, towering walls glistening with water, strange rock formations looming in their headlamps. But the constant spray had turned the adventure chilly. Linda couldn't stop shivering, her teeth chattering in the 15 degrees Celsius, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, cave air. John knew getting back up wouldn't be easy. The waterfall spray had turned the ropes into slippery snakes. He went first, muscles burning as he hauled himself upward. After an exhausting climb, he finally reached the top. Linda came next, moving slower as the cold seeped into her bones. When she finally emerged, her whole body shook violently from hypothermia. "Go warm up in the car," John urged, helping her out of the cave entrance. Alone now, John returned to check on Charles. The cave roared like a living thing, the waterfall's thunder drowning out all other sounds. "Charles, you okay down there?" John yelled every few minutes, no response. After 20 minutes of silence, John's stomach twisted with worry. He grabbed the rope and pulled. It came up too easily, hand over hand, faster now, until his blood ran cold. There, about 12 meters up, the rope ended in a jagged cut. Just ended. John's heart pounded as he screamed Charles's name into the darkness. Only the cave's echoes answered. The waterfall's mist made it impossible to see more than a few feet down. Hands shaking, he bolted for the surface where Linda sat shivering in their car. "The rope broke," John gasped. "Charles, he might have fallen." Linda's face went blank with shock. Before she could process it, John was already moving. "We need help now." They sped down the dirt road, frantically waving down the first car they saw. John practically threw himself at the driver's window. "Call rescuers," he shouted. "A man fell in Megawell Cave." The driver peeled out, kicking up gravel as he raced for help. At a nearby outfitter, they grabbed emergency gear. 2 ropes, one just 2 feet shorter than the pit's depth, John noted grimly. A sleeping bag and John's waterproof suit. "Wait at the road for the rescue team," he told Linda, his voice tight. Grabbing the fresh ropes and gear, he plunged back into the cave's gaping mouth. At the pit's edge, his training took over, despite shaking hands. Knots tied, anchors checked. Muscle memory carried him through. The waterfall's roar was overwhelming now, its icy spray soaking through his layers within seconds. The descent was torture. Each foot lower plunged him into colder, heavier air. The waterfall's echo transformed into a monstrous heartbeat in the cavern. Then, impact. Charles lay broken at the base, his shattered helmet reflecting John's headlamp in jagged fragments. No movement, no breath. John's hands moved automatically, checking for signs of life he knew wouldn't be there. Working through numb horror, John gently bundled Charles in the sleeping bag. As he began his agonizing climb back to surface, one thought looped. How would he ever explain this to Linda? The cave had taken another soul, and no amount of experience could change that crushing truth. John started climbing back up, his arms already shaking from exhaustion. The new rope felt strong, but scary thoughts kept popping into his head. What if this one breaks too? The waterfall spray made everything slippery, turning each handhold into a challenge. His muscles burned like he'd been doing pull-ups for hours, but he kept going. Then he saw it. That deadly sharp ledge where the first rope failed. The rock had a deep, smooth groove, like when you rub a string against wood for years, with little rope fibers still stuck to it. Suddenly, clink. A small rock broke loose above him, tumbling past his face into the blackness below. The sound snapped John back to reality. This was no time to freeze up. He tightened his grip and kept climbing, trying not to imagine what that falling rock sounded like when it finally hit bottom. As dawn approached, exhausted rescuers finally emerged from the cave with Charles's body. The night-long recovery had taken its toll. Narrow passages had to be widened, equipment failed under strain, and the stretcher was nearly destroyed by sharp rocks. Later investigation revealed troubling details about the rope. While rated to hold 1,250 kilograms, about the weight of a small car, this European-style rope had a thinner outer layer than American caving ropes. Tests showed Charles's climbing style, using a frog technique that creates bouncing motions, likely put 225 to 360 kilograms of repeated stress on the rope at the exact spot where it rubbed against that deadly sharp ledge. The tragedy became an important lesson for cavers worldwide about equipment compatibility and the dangers of mixing different climbing systems. As one rescuer noted, in caving, the margin between safety and disaster is often thinner than the sheath on a climbing rope. That sharp ledge, 6 meters down, became the rope's worst enemy. The rope's outer fibers were getting shredded bit by bit. Experts think the final snap might have happened one of two ways. The weakened rope finally gave out from all that rubbing. As Charles climbed up from the cave bottom, his frog-style technique made him bounce slightly with each move. This put extra stress on the rope, making the rope saw back and forth against that sharp ledge, which eventually caused the damaged fibers to snap completely. Charles fell instantly, hitting the cave floor at terrifying speed. The impact broke his helmet like a walnut under a hammer, twisted his body violently, caused immediate fatal injuries. Charles's story reminds us that underground, there's no such thing as a completely safe adventure, only calculated risks. As experienced cavers say, the cave always wins the arguments. On November 23, 2019, 5 excited Purdue University students pulled up to Valhalla Cave in Alabama, ready for adventure. They'd spent weeks planning, studying maps, packing gear, even getting the required permit. Valhalla was famous among cavers for its jaw-dropping 227-foot entrance pit. That's taller than a 20-story building. For experts with the right equipment, it was a thrill. For beginners, extremely dangerous, but they hit a big problem right away. Their longest rope didn't reach the bottom. The safe way would have been using one continuous rope, but theirs were too short. Instead of waiting or finding better gear, they took a deadly shortcut, tying 2 ropes together with a double fisherman's knot. While strong, this created a risky situation. The knot would hang just below the cave's edge. Anyone going down would have to stop midair, unhook from the top rope, and reattach to the bottom one, like changing trains on a cliffside. Trevor Cole, 21, their most experienced member, felt confident he could manage it. His friends trusted him, so without much discussion, he volunteered to go first. He double-checked everything: harness tight, helmet secure, carabiner locked, rappel device properly threaded. Taking a deep breath, he leaned back and began lowering himself into the dark mouth of the cave. Trevor leaned back into open air, his body tilting backward as if the cave itself was swallowing him whole. The rope hissed through his metal descender like a whispering snake, keeping his fall slow and steady. Above him, 4 wide-eyed faces peered over the edge, their headlamps casting nervous spotlights on his descent. Valhalla Cave gets its name from Norse mythology. It's literally called the Hall of the Slain, fitting considering what happened next. Trevor's breath stayed even as he sank deeper, the circle of daylight shrinking to a dime-sized glow above him. Then his headlamp caught it. The knot, that thick, twisted bulge where the ropes married together. His stomach tightened. Here's the thing about passing a knot midair. It's like trying to switch roller coaster seats while the ride's still moving. One hand always has to hold on while the other works. Trevor knew the drill. Plant feet, lock the descender. Unclip, reattach. But practice walls in a gym don't have 200 feet of nothing beneath you. He braced his boots against the wall, fingers dancing over his gear. Click. The upper rope was free. For 1 heartbeat, he hung there by sheer friction and willpower. Then, a sound. Not the drip of water or the creak of gear. Something wrong. The lower rope, it twitched, like a sleeping predator stirring. And that's when the real nightmare began. 1 second, Trevor was there, focused, in control. The next, gravity won. He fell. 200 feet, 60 meters. However you measure it, it was too far. The impact wasn't like in movies, no dramatic echo, just a single, final thud that left his body broken on the cavern floor. His helmet? Useless now. Designed for bumps and scrapes, not this. Up top, his friends froze. Their brains couldn't process what they'd just witnessed. Trevor. Someone whispered it first, voice cracking, silence. Trevor. This time, a scream, nothing. Reality crashed down harder than Trevor had. Their gear was barely enough for a safe descent, let alone a rescue. No spare ropes, no emergency plan. Just 4 terrified students staring into a hole that had just swallowed their friend whole. One of the students grabbed their phone with trembling fingers, barely able to dial 911. Valhalla Cave is so deep that sunlight never reaches the bottom, even at noon. That darkness was waiting when the Chattanooga rescue team arrived hours later. The professionals moved like clockwork. No wasted motions as they set up ropes thicker than your wrist, checking every buckle and knot twice. The first rescuer slid into the pit, his headlamp cutting through the blackness. The only sounds? His steady breathing and the metallic shink of gear brushing rock. When they pulled up Trevor's rope, their stomachs dropped. His rappel device was still locked tight, exactly as he'd left it. That meant one thing: his gear didn't fail. Something worse happened. Then they saw it. The carabiner, that metal clip connecting him to safety, was slightly open, just a tiny gap, like a door left ajar. But when Trevor shifted his weight during that rope transfer, that millimeter-wide space became a death sentence. His harness slipped right through. No dramatic snap, no forgotten knot. Just one small piece of metal betraying him at the worst possible second. As rescuers finally reached the cave floor, their headlamps revealed a heartbreaking scene. Trevor lay still on the rocks, his own headlamp still glowing weakly, like a dying flashlight. That tiny light in the darkness hit harder than anyone expected. The team leader took a deep breath before keying his radio. "We've found him," he said, voice steady but tired. "It's too late." Up top, Trevor's friends collapsed under those words. Some cried, some just stared. They'd known, of course. How could anyone survive that fall? But hearing it out loud made it real in a way that stole their breath. Here's the hard truth about caving. Experience isn't a magic shield. Trevor knew what he was doing. He'd done everything right, mostly. But underground mostly isn't good enough. One tiny mistake, one unlucky break, that's all it takes. The group had done the math. They'd talked about risks, but they'd missed two big things. Never tie ropes together mid-drop, never put the knot right at the edge.